It's 2 p.m. on Thursday, April 24th here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Moon Gun-young. It's been more than 8 days since a nearly 7,000-ton Sewol ferry sank off Korea's southwestern coast with more than 470 people on board. More bodies have been retrieved from the sunken vessel overnight, raising the death toll to 169. And as the death toll rises, the number of missing declines. As of this Thursday afternoon, 133 remain unaccounted for. Though hope is fading that there may be additional survivors in the frigid waters, search and rescue operations continue this Thursday for that very 133 passengers who remain missing. Let's go straight to our correspondent Hwang Sung-hee. She has been covering this story for us from Paengmok-hang Harbor, 20 kilometers from the site of the ship capsize. Sung-hee, it's yet another day. Chances are they'll recover more bodies at this point. What can you tell us?
Kanyang, we are now into our 9th day of search and rescue operations, but still we have not seen a single survivor yet. Now the official death toll, like you mentioned, has risen to 169, and most of the bodies retrieved yesterday and today are high school students. Family members who have been camping out here at the Paengmok-hang Harbor for days now, they are really growing restless and really clinging on to their last shreds of hope. And as the death toll rises, we have been seeing more and more families heading over to this harbor to identify with their own eyes the bodies of their children. Now, many parents have been gathering around a list that describes the retrieved bodies, trying to match the identification, the descriptions with their own loved ones. Kanyang?
Sung-hee, as for the search and rescue operations, I believe divers are entering a new phase in the search, right?
That's right, Kanyang. The rescue team has been attempting to enter the center area of the 4th floor cabins since early this afternoon, but no word yet on whether that was a success. We have been hearing that this area was where the most of the high school students were staying in, and this is where authorities believe that many of the missing passengers would be in, because, like you said, we have around 130 missing passengers still, and most of them are students from Danwon High School. The rescue team, we have the biggest rescue team yet today with more than 700 rescue personnel, 261 rescue boats, and 35 aircraft. Now, the rescue teams have been focusing their search on the 3rd and 4th floors of the vessel, and so far they said they have not found any air pockets. And this is really bad news. It greatly reduces the chances of finding any survivors in this ship. Kanyang?
However, we as a nation, we're not giving up hope, and it seems like there is still a message of hope and support there on the site as well.
That's right. As you can see behind me are yellow ribbons praying for the safe return of the missing passengers on the Sewol ferry, and we've been seeing messages of support arriving from across the nation for all those still missing inside the sunken ship. Now, the messages read that we love you all and that we all believe in miracles. This has been Hwang Sung-hee reporting live from Paengmok-hang Harbor.
Now, the parents of the missing are now into the 9th day of waiting for any news of their sons and daughters who were on board the ill-fated Sewol ferry. The families have been huddled in a gymnasium near the accident site in Chindo, and that is where our Hwang Ji-hye joins us live. Ji-hye.
Kanyang, the families here, while the whole country is praying for a miracle, the families here are near complete exhaustion, both physically and mentally. The atmosphere is growing tense as divers continue to pull out bodies this morning. The families are helplessly looking at the television screen showing a list of descriptions of what the newly discovered bodies look like. There are now fewer noticeably fewer families here at the Jindo Gymnasium as more bodies are being discovered and identified. The families are leaving to tend to their lost loved ones at Paengmok-hang Harbor and to the hospital. Those remaining here are going back and forth from the gymnasium to the harbor about twice a day. A father I talked to yesterday said he has given up his hope for his daughter and he just wants someone to find her body so she can be laid to rest in peace. Doctors at the gymnasium say the families are in a state of shock and deep mourning, which are resulting in headaches and exhaustion. They add that while the families are now suffering from acute emotional and mental shocks, the symptoms of severe depression could show up 2 or 3 months later. This has been Hwang Sung-hee reporting live from the Jindo Gymnasium.
A temporary group memorial altar has been set up in Ansan, the city most touched by this disaster. Thousands of citizens visited the site to say goodbye on Wednesday, and hundreds more passed through this morning. Our Shin Se-min is on the site, and she joins us live from Ansan Olympic Memorial Hall. Se-min, the atmosphere there must be incredibly somber.
A continuous stream of people are coming in as we speak here at Ansan Olympic Memorial Hall, and now many people here are having trouble even standing in front of the pictures of the victim that are being displayed, and sounds of mourning, sounds of wailing by mourners never seems to stop as we speak. And as of now, the total number, the well over 18,000 mourners have visited since yesterday. Students, teachers, and faculty members from Danwon High School have been among those paying respects. This group memorial is open 24 hours a day here in Ansan, except for certain times of the day for regular maintenance purposes. The memorial will be open throughout the weekend as well. The local government here has also set up message service so that those who cannot come in person can send text messages of condolences. The messages that come through are being displayed on one of the screens here. And while mourning for the victims continues, seniors of the Danwon High School returned to classes this morning. And next Monday, April 28th, sophomores as well as juniors who weren't on the Sewolho ferry will also return to classes. Counseling and therapy will be part of classes for both students and teachers to help those affected by this tragedy.
And as we reported earlier, Se-min, more bodies recovered from the sunken Sewolho ferry are being sent to the city of Ansan. How is the local government there dealing with the situation?
Local hospitals and funeral halls here in the city of Ansan have been struggling to cope with the number of victims being sent here. And now, unfortunately, that also means for many families have had to be placed on a waiting list for a funeral hall. Officials here in the city are working to expand facilities while securing funeral halls in nearby cities like Siheung and Anyang. Meanwhile, 12 more victims are expected to be released to their families from Ansan soon. And this has been Shin Se-min reporting from Ansan Olympic Memorial Hall.
Now, it's not just those of us here in Korea, but people all around the world have reached out to Korea in its time of need. Korean Americans have set up memorial altars throughout the United States expressing support for the victims and their families. Our Kim Hyun-bin reports.
Overseas Koreans in Los Angeles set up a memorial altar in front of the Korean consulate, and it's been adorned with messages of hope and flowers.
It is heartbreaking for the children. I've been keeping them in my prayers since the incident.
Memorial altars have been set up across the world by Koreans living overseas. Those visiting a temporary altar in Washington, D.C. said they were at a loss for words about the tragedy and plan on holding a fundraiser for the victims' families.
It's not just in Korea, but people in the U.S. as well are also crying for the lost ones.
In Times Square in New York, more than 200 Koreans and foreigners attended a memorial ceremony to show support for Korea and all those here who are suffering from the devastating tragedy. Kim Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
Meanwhile, a joint investigation by the police and prosecutors in ongoing into the captain, crew members, and the owner of the marine company is currently underway. And with the Korean public following the probe very closely, much attention is on the daily findings of the investigation team. For more details, we now connect live with our Connie Kim at the News Center. Connie, what are we learning of late?
Hi, Ganyang. Remember the 15 rescued crew members that left the capsizing Seodo ferry? Well, some or maybe even all of the 11 crew members that have been taken into custody could face charges. Now, this includes a detained captain charged with 5 offenses, including the violation of the ship crew law. The prosecution is looking into whether the crew could be charged with what's called negligent homicide, now this referring to death caused by the inaction of the defendant. During the investigation process, some of the crew have reportedly shown signs of regret, admitting to their mistakes and saying they should have taken rescue measures. And it's not just the crew under probe. The owner of the Seodo ferry, Changhae Marine Company, is also under fire. Following the raid of the offices and homes of the company owner Yoo Byung-an and its headquarters in Seoul yet Wednesday, the prosecution is looking into whether Changhae Marine Company had used its funds for lobbying purposes. The company's audit report last year shows that its entertainment expenses since 2001 had amounted to over $900,000. The prosecution is looking into both Changhae Marine Company and its affiliate, Chunhae to review how these expenses were used, with speculation that some of it may have gone toward lobbying lawmakers to increase their assets.
Right, Connie, some very, very serious allegations are flying around at the moment. Now, as for the government, it seems like the government is learning well from this accident, and we hear that it will launch a review of all disaster countermeasures in this country. Tell us more about that.
Right, Ganyang. The Disaster Control Tower has announced plans to review its disaster countermeasure manuals in all ministries. This comes on the heels of criticism that the Coast Guard and government were slow in their response to the sinking, and raising speculation the emergency procedure and command chain failed to operate properly. During a ministerial-level meeting Thursday, Prime Minister Chung Eun-won said a safety innovation master plan should be made. He suggested private safety personnel be consulted to come up with a practical plan. Now, this comes after President Park Geun-hye slammed the government's slow rescue operations early this week, calling for the review of the entire disaster and emergency response systems. Calls are rising as well for the presidential office of Cheongwade to take over the nation's disaster control tower. An official from the presidential office implied that the government's countermeasures will be announced in the coming weeks and months after all the facts about the disaster have been settled. Legislation has also been introduced that will make it illegal for captains without first-class sailing licenses to sail vessels weighing more than 6,000 tons. The Seodo came in at nearly 7,000. The captain of the Seodo ferry, Lee Jun-seok, holds a second-class sailing license, which is allowed under current regulations. Well, that's all from me for now, but back to you in the studio.
All right, thank you, Connie. Now, with prospects dimming on finding any survivors on the sunken ferry, people have begun to ask the question, how will this nearly 7,000-ton ship be recovered? Well, some experts say if working conditions are favorable, it may only take 1 to 2 months. We look at some of the possibilities in what is likely to become a very lengthy procedure of recovery. Lee Ji-yeon reports.
With families of missing passengers requesting officials to conclude search operations soon, discussion on how to salvage the wreckage is expected to gain more momentum. The large ferry weighs over 6,000 tons on its own, but with added weight, it's expected to exceed 10,000 tons. Salvaging the 7,900-ton ferry Ariake, which capsized off the coast of Japan in 2009, was a challenging operation because of the cargo that had shifted to one side. A similar situation with the Seodo ferry. It took over a year to salvage the ship with cranes after cutting it into 4 pieces. Then how about operations for the Seodo ferry? Currently, there are 5 cranes on standby near the accident site, including an 8,000-ton crane, the largest in the country. Floating docks are set to be brought in as well, but the salvage process is likely to face a rough start because the ferry now lies upside down. Salvaging the ship as is may cause damage to the upper levels of the vessel. The safest and most realistic method being considered is to use both cranes and floating docks at the same time. First, chains would go around the vessel, Then lift bags filled with air would be installed to slowly put the ship on its right side up, while pulling it closer to the surface. Then the floating docks can be taken underwater to support the vessel from below and push it up.
And whilst there may not be the expertise in Korea, there is international expertise, and interestingly, this is the method they intend to use for phase 2 of the Costa Concordia salvage. So there is a precedent. It's not easy. Please don't misunderstand me. This is not an easy operation, but it is within, if there is international help and experience available, that might assist the Korean salvage company in achieving its aim.
The government continues to look through all options to identify the best method. It has requested cranes and barges from China while asking the Japanese shipbuilder that initially built the Seoul ferry for assistance. Lee Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
And before we head on to general news, as you can see on your left-hand side of the screen, 2 more bodies have been recovered, putting the death toll at 171 and 131 remain missing. Now, U.S. President Barack Obama is in Tokyo today on the first leg of a week-long trip to Asia. Following summit talks with the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe earlier Thursday, the American president made comments that are sure to catch the attention of China. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
During his 8-day four-nation tour of Asia, U.S. President Barack Obama is trying to reaffirm America's commitment to its allies on the other side of the Pacific. In Japan, Obama set out to convince Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe that he can deliver on his security and economic pledges, with an existing defense treaty between the two countries taking center stage. The current language requires the U.S. to come to Japan's defense if the country is attacked. After his summit talks with Abe, Obama said Thursday that the treaty extends to the disputed island chain known as Senkaku in Japan or Diaoyu in China. This means that if a conflict were to take place on the islands, the U.S. would be obliged to respond. This is the first time the U.S. president has sided with Tokyo on this sensitive issue, which is sure to upset Beijing. The two leaders also held discussions on a Trans-Pacific trade agreement, but failed to come to an agreement. They pledged to continue to exchange views on the matter. After finishing up in Tokyo, Obama will come to Seoul where he will meet with President Park Geun-hye on Friday. He is to express his sympathy to the victims of the South Korean ferry disaster. The two leaders will also talk over ways to respond to the North Korea threat, particularly with the possibility of a fourth nuclear test from Pyongyang looming. President Obama is also expected to express his support to President Park's vision on reunification of the two Koreas. In a speech in Dresden last month, she urged the North to expand reunions of families separated by the Korean War and increase cross-border economic and cultural exchanges, which include the South bolstering humanitarian aid. It will be Obama's fourth visit to South Korea, which represents the most trips to the nation by a sitting U.S. president. After departing from Seoul, Obama will head to Malaysia and the Philippines. Kim Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
Now, new satellite imagery suggests North Korea has completed expansion of a centrifuge facility at its Yongbyon nuclear site and could now be installing equipment or even centrifuges inside. Now, this is according to an analysis of satellite images by the Institute for Science and International Security, which reported last August that North Korea had doubled the size of its gas centrifuge plant at the complex. Now, images taken in early April show no significant alterations have been made to the centrifuge building, suggesting North Korea could now be concentrating on setting up equipment inside. The imagery also shows water being discharged near a 5-megawatt electric reactor at the site in April, suggesting the reactor is likely up and running. Now, shifting our focus to the economy, Korea's gross domestic product grew at the fastest pace in more than 3 years in the first quarter of this year. The Bank of Korea said Thursday that the country's real GDP grew 3.9% in the 3 months from a year earlier, which is the highest jump since the first quarter of 2011. Compared to the previous 3 months, the economy expanded 0.9%, maintaining its growth of around 1% for the third consecutive quarter. The growth was helped by strong exports, expanding consumer spending, and the recovering construction sector. Facilities investment and imports, however, dropped from the last quarter of 2013. Now, the central bank said growth was in line with its previous forecast. And now, with it being day 9 since this tragic accident off Korea's southwestern coast happened, let's now turn back to our Hwang Sung-hee at the Paengmok-hang Harbor. Now, this is the nearest port from the accident site, about 20 kilometers from the accident site, from where the Sewol-ho ferry rescue operations are currently underway. Our Hwang Sung-hee has been covering the story from the harbor since day 2 and 3, and we will connect live with her now. Sung-hee, as for our search and rescue operations and the death toll, what can you tell us?
Kanyang, it's been more than a week since the accident, and still we have not seen a single survivor yet. However, 2 more bodies were recovered just moments ago, raising the official confirmed death toll to 171. Now, most of the bodies recovered yesterday and today have been high school students, students from Danwon High School who were on a school trip to South Korea's Jeju Island. Now, there have been family members here camping out at this harbor for days, and now they're really holding on to their last shreds of hope, and they are growing anxious and restless about the wait. I see many parents gathered around a list that describes the retrieved body, and they are trying to match the descriptions with their own loved ones. Kanyang?
Well, Sung-hee, as for the search and rescue operations, I believe divers are entering a new phase in that very search.
That's right. The rescue team have been trying to enter the center area of the 4th floor cabin since early this morning, but no word yet on whether that was a success. Now, the 4th floor cabins are where the Danwon High School students were staying in the ferry, and this is also where many of the missing passengers are believed to be in. So once we figure that out, we may be seeing a surge in the death toll, or maybe perhaps even a survivor. The rescue operations have been ongoing, and we are expected to see the largest rescue team working on the rescue operations today. The numbers I have for you are we have more than 700 rescue personnel and more than 200 rescue ships and 35 aircrafts here at the Paengmok-hang Harbor trying to find survivors in the sunken ship. Kanyang?
All right, thank you, Sung-hee. That was our Hwang Sung-hee live from Paengmok-hang Harbor, 20 kilometers from the accident site.
The search and rescue efforts on the southeastern coast and the weather should not be a negative factor. Now, conditions in Chindo are clear today with calm winds and tides. However, today is the last day of the neap tide period, which means starting tomorrow, the currents will speed up and the waves will get stronger. Now, the current temperature of the water in Chindo is at 11.9 degrees Celsius with the winds blowing at 3.5 meters per second, and the height of the wave is at 0.6 6 meters, which are good conditions for the divers. Now, for the rest of the nation, we can expect a very warm day along with the dry weather advisory nationwide. Now, the fine dust has returned as well, with the central region and the eastern region seeing the highest levels. Now, going over to our readings, Seoul tops out at 27 this afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Gwangju and Busan will get up to 27 and 22 degrees. Now moving over to other regions, Jeju Island tops out at 23, Dokdo at 19, while Mangeungang tops out at 17. Well, that's all I have at this moment. Back to you, Kanyang.
Thank you, Michelle, for that, and thank you for watching. That's all for me at this hour, but our steady coverage on the nation's search and rescue efforts in Korea's ferry disaster continues here on ARIRANG News. Join me again at the top of the next hour.